Hi, everyone. Really excited to have everyone join us here today. I'm Hannah Fitzpatrick. I'm Senior Project Manager for Education at SOS UK, Students Organising for Sustainability. We are a charity that seeks to transform the education system to deliver sustainability and climate change through a youth-led approach, and we support Teach the Future, which is led by secondary and tertiary education students as part of that work. It is wonderful to welcome you all to our launch webinar for the primary phase of Teach the Future's Curriculum for a Changing Planet. And this follows our amazing previous work on the secondary curriculum. This track changes review of the national curriculum showcases how climate education can be integrated across 11 subjects at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. We believe that climate education should be meaningfully woven throughout all phases of learning as a golden thread. As the climate crisis is the biggest issue that humanity faces, our schools are a really critical part of mobilising and delivering that change. We need an education system that empowers young people to meet the local, national and global challenges of the century ahead. And this report is a really exciting piece of work that will hopefully go a lot of the way to meeting that challenge. So just in terms of a bit of housekeeping before we start, we are recording and uploading this video to YouTube, so you will be able to watch it back. There will be an opportunity for Q&A, but please do use the chat box all the way through to put your questions down. It might be that something comes to you and you forget it, and I really don't want that to happen, so it's really important you put those questions in the whole way through. My colleague Marta is here and will be dealing with any tech issues. So if you've got any problems with sound or seeing the slides, please just put a message in the Q&A function for that. So today's webinar, I am so excited. We're going to hear from the academics who've been working really hard behind the scenes with teachers and educators to get this project ready. We're going to hear from some fantastic young people who really are the driving force behind Teach the Future. We're going to hear from Meryl, an amazing teacher who's been using our secondary track changes resources in her school, and I know is getting ready to implement our primary content. And Meryl will be sharing really how these can be used on the ground. And I'm really looking forward to a keynote from Cindy Forde, which I know is going to be a really inspiring take on sustainability in young people. This review showcases how climate education can be integrated across 11 subjects, and I've put them on the slide here. I am really excited to learn more about how this work can have a transformative impact right across the primary curriculum. I am a former primary teacher myself, and I know how time poor teachers are. There are so many things to do in school. The curriculum feels so packed, which is why the track changes method is so exciting, and it's crucially very, very achievable way of better integrating climate education into schools. So I'm really excited. We're going to be hearing first of all from some young people, year 5 and 6 pupils from Corbridge Middle School.
Our planet is rapidly changing, and I'm concerned for the future, but I know that young people can be change makers if we're given support. We seem to learn lots of information at school that doesn't seem very important in the real world, because we don't seem to learn about sustainability in many subjects. I think each subject should cover it in a different way.
Sustainability is important to me because I know that climate change and plastic pollution is causing problems for the wonderful wild animals on Earth, and that makes me sad. I think we should learn more about climate change because we are the future and the answer to all the world's problems, and we are the ones that can manufacture all the things that we need to help.
If we learn more about the sustainable food of problems of plastic waste, then maybe more people would eat less meat or pack lunches with less packaging. It makes me sad that I try my best, but other people don't try as much as I do. I want to learn more about renewable energy in school. We made model wind turbine science, and these seem to be much better than fossil fuels. The more I know, the more I can help.
I really want to know about how to live sustainably, as I want to make a difference in the world, and I think they should teach this in school to make learning relevant.
A few teachers in school link lessons to the Sustainable Development Goals. Maybe all learning could link to the goals. There are 8 billion people, and if we work together, we can have a positive impact. Nothing should be unsustainable if we want to protect our future. Sustainability is important to me because I think that we can make a difference to the world in a better place, but we need to learn useful skills in school to make sure we can help in the future. Actually, taking action for Planet Earth makes me feel really good. We should have opportunities to work with people outside of the school to help make our community better. We do quite a lot about sustainability in science and some in geography, but there is so much to do. It would make sense to cover topics such as healthy diets for a healthy planet in food tech, using sustainable materials in DT, or reading books about global issues in English.
What can we do to help the planet?
We could make more electric vehicles, more bins so people won't litter, village or town litter picks, water consumption, unplugging devices or plugs when you don't need them, composting, change light bulbs to energy-saving bulbs, more recycling bins, don't litter, and grow more plants. We are the next generation. We want to see stars.
That video is just so fabulous. I don't think I'll ever get tired of watching that. Absolutely amazing. Really excited now to hear from Camille, who is part of Teach the Future and is going to talk to us about the project as a whole.
Hello, so I'm a volunteer at Teach the Future. Teach the Future is a youth-led organisation which is really important, as I think that young people and students, we're the most aware of what we have and haven't learnt in schools, and I think that young people can definitely imagine a transformed future, as we've seen in that video, because our minds are less limited by society and we can use our imaginations. And Teach the Future England's main aims are to get the government to adopt our climate education bill, to integrate education about the climate crisis into every single subject, and to review the Department for Education, Sustainability and Climate Strategy, and also to include the climate crisis in teacher training, and create a new teaching qualification for this as well, and to retrofit school buildings to align with net zero 2030 goals. So as students, we think that the curriculum doesn't integrate information about the climate crisis, and we've experienced learning about climate change in science and geography, but most of us have only learned about problems and not the solutions. And a Future Forum report showed that 68% of students aged 14 to 18 thought that climate change should be incorporated into all subjects, showing the demand for this. So a memory I have was that in primary school, we had an assembly about climate change every single year. And I remember being so anxious for it, because all they told us was that that the ice was melting and polar bears were dying, and every year it was getting worse. And it's not a very nice thing to hear as a 5-year-old. And we think it's much better to tell students what they can actually do, including individual actions, but also going past just recycling and turning off the lights, but like tell them about something bigger and how we can work towards a transformed future for everyone. And we're increasingly seeing how urgent the climate crisis is, and how it's not just about polar bears. And although biodiversity loss is extremely bad, it's also about all humans in the world, and the climate crisis is linked to culture and racism and colonialism and religion, and it's just inextricably linked to every single thing. So that's why we want the curriculum to reflect this. And I hope that the review will be used by teachers to make small changes to their teaching, using the suggestions that can reflect our need for creativity and problem solving and understanding of how the climate crisis affects every subject and every area of life.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Camille. I'm really excited now to hear our keynote from Cindy Forde.
Oh, thanks so much, Hannah. Just give me a sec so I can work out how to share my screen. Hopefully it's not going to be too hard for me today. But it's such a pleasure. I just have to start by saying thank you so much to Teach the Future and to everybody who's here today. It's just, I'm so grateful to see the work that you're doing to students organising for sustainability. It's absolutely critical work, and it gives me a huge sense of hope to see how the determination, the resilience and the progress that you're making with this, I think is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I've opened today this is one of the books I've written for children. It's called Bright New World. I hope that you would approve, Camille, because it steps into the future where we've actually solved some of the biggest challenges that we have, and it leads with the solutions. So children really have this sense that there is this world that we can look forward to having, rather than the fear that often surrounds, the messaging around climate breakdown and biodiversity breakdown. All the solutions or many of them are here if we act in time to make them happen, and if we think differently. And I think you're absolutely right. Again, I'll go back to what you were saying, Camille. It's very much a cultural lens, a dominant cultural narrative. We think that our education system is the only education system, but it's been very much formed, as Doris Lessing's wonderful quote here says, to keep us believing that this system is the only system that we have. It's a process of indoctrination, and this education system has been designed post-industrial revolution to keep people very much wedded to the belief that this is the way that, continual growth, capitalism, even the school days were designed to fit the factory time. So we really do need to think that there is another way of looking at the world, and a world and design education that's fit the purpose that we need it to do now, rather than the world as it was. And, there's clearly a huge problem with what people are learning. This is from David Orr's work. We've come to the edge of an existential crisis. We're facing possible, really serious questions of whether this earth is now a safe space, will remain a safe space for human life. And yet we've been led by people who have PhDs, who have law degrees, who have MBAs. So what on earth what stories have we told? What have we been teaching? We have 3% of people who attend university, but this makes 80% of our leadership. So if we're to answer these critical crises, to find the solutions to our crisis, we have to educate people differently. This is the brilliant Vandana Shiva. She's no holds barred on her belief in Western education, a very partial type of education. It's designed to fit us into this kind of consumer product machine, so we don't actually understand ourselves as part of a much wider ecosystem. So how do we shift then from this egocentric worldview, which is very much what we have, this dominator model? You mentioned again, Camille, colonization and climate change. For the last 500 years at least, we've been driven by this notion that extracts, you take over, you dominate, you extract to extinction, to extract to exhaustion. And it's been led, if you look at these infamous pictures of the UN COPs, 193 leaders line up, and you normally see, somewhere between 3 and 7 women. I'm not saying men can't think differently, but it's very much that dominator model that is, associated with yin and yang. We're out of balance. We've lost space for this feminine worldview, or an ecocentric worldview, which puts us as part of Earth's ecosystem rather than dominating. I just thought I'd have a quick look at this, because I'm also a storyteller, so I write lots of different stories, and that's part of my work, trying to tell different stories for Earth. You know, there's such beautiful mythology. This is Wade Davis, an anthropologist. You know, he grew up in the forests of British Columbia, and he was educated to see forests as raw and material resources, components that could be hacked down. You've got the fantastic First Nations people of the region who had the beautiful myth of Raven. Now, whether you believe the myth or not, it tells you there's something much more spiritual and sacred about the forest. So you protect it, you know, in the same way that you have in the mining company. You know, this is another, you know, different worldview. Look at, are mountains piles of rock waiting to be mined, or are they these living beings that so many of the indigenous cultures will see them as? And it's not, you know, taking that literally, but it's just understanding with different stories. You have this different relationship with Earth. It's part of us. It's part of our life support system, and we need to treat it you know, with that sense of sacred and with that sense of respect that's very much missing in how we, you know, we treat Earth's natural resources now, and how we're educated to treat them. So in my work with my small company that I founded called Planetary, which is dedicated to developing Earth-led education, there's two schools of thought. You know, let's do what we can with the curriculum that we have, which is the brilliant work that they're all doing here. And there's also, as Buckminster Fuller would say, design new models. You know, let's be ready to step into this new world. So Planetary is very much about pioneering this Earth-led education. So we look at yeah, that's exactly the kind of the approach that we take. It's developing education that will enable people to have that ecocentric worldview. These are some of the themes in Bright New World, which are actually the themes that are the biggest pressures on our systems, our planetary boundaries, how we use our energy, our food systems, our transport systems, our how we treat our carbon sinks, our rainforests, our oceans. So these are massive topics, but these are, if you can use them in math, you can use them in literacy, you can use them in art, you can use them in really any application. But by cycling through those topics, children are getting a really clear understanding of, you know, of how our life support system works, how, you know, what the solutions can be, whether you're going to be an astrophysicist or a hairdresser. You know, you've got that framework of Earth, of what our Earth can support and sustain. And around that, we wrap mindfulness, because obviously it's not what you know, just what you know, it's how you apply that knowledge. And around that comes a whole set of stories and adventures and excitement, really, but to create it so you are creating these different narratives for Earth. A lot of what our children have around them now, you know, fantastic production values, but the stories themselves can either be, you know, range from the inane to the pernicious. There's quite a lot of violence, there's quite a lot of destructiveness. So what about if we started to tell stories or wrap everything we do in stories that really allow us to develop a much more participatory, collaborative worldview, you know, to really help to shape that mindset that will take us forward to be the innovators and entrepreneurs of a brighter world. So, you know, we design things to enable young people to, you know, engage and inspire them, to equip them to really be this global communication community of young change makers. This is some of work on another project, which is around enabling young people around the world who live near marine protected areas to really understand how the oceans work and how to care for them. And that was done in the collaboration with the Blue Marine Foundation. You know, we did really work in, I can't remember how many countries, probably like 10 or 12, and the children all connected with each other. So if you were in the Maldives, you know, you're living on a coral reef, and if you're in the UK, you get to learn to understand why it's so important that what happens in the reefs in the Maldives affects your life in Britain. So, you know, the whole purpose is to shape young people who can think very differently from the word go. There is this document, you've probably seen it, Education for Sustainable Development. It came out some time ago. It's quite dense, but I just tried to condense in a few headlines the type of competency that it's looking for. It's not the ability to endlessly pass exams. It really is the ability to think systemically, to think in an integrated way, to think critically. It's the how of the way that your brain can work, of how your imagination can work, rather than how many facts and figures you can spew out in a defined number of times. So it really is a different way of looking at how we try to educate our young people today. I had the great good fortune, some of you might know, Kate Raworth, who's the formulator of donut economics, and I love the way she, in her presentation, she starts with the map, or some of them with there's Ptolemy there with his whole belief that the Earth is at the center of the solar system, and then there's Copernicus hovering around the edges going, actually, it's completely the other way round. It's the sun, clearly. And I think that we're reaching a point in our civilization that we really need to flip how we've been thinking on our head, instead of educating people to a very narrow elite to profit from our world. We need to educate people to put Earth first. So as a human family, we can thrive here. So I'd just like to, I love this slide. This is fantastic. Donna Brave, who's an activist in Standing Rock community. And I think this is really what, it feels, this is a huge inspiration for my work. It feels very much what you are all doing here. There is this shared vision for humanity. It does exist, whether we can see it or not. Our task is to become receptive to it, to see it, to make it visible and activate it, using all means of communication, which of course the most powerful one is education, so that our collective imagination will be no longer be driven by dreams of destruction and downfall, but elevated by the possibility of a worldwide healing and unification. Right, that feels very much like what everybody here is working towards. So yeah, huge privilege to join you today. Thank you so much.
So inspiring, Cindy. Thank you so much. There's so much to think about there, but really, really wonderful. I'd like to invite our academics now to talk to us about the process of creating the review.
Okay, thank you very much. I just need to get hold of this and start the slideshow. Right, thanks everybody. First of all, this is from three of us. Elsa, who's going to be speaking alongside with me, and myself. I'm Paul Vare, and Alex Catallo sends her apologies. She's very much been a part of the team all the way through. We'll explain her role as we go through, but she's not able to be with us right now. This brief overview, then, we're going to explain, to start with, the work we did before the primary review. We're going to talk about the secondary curriculum, because that's been going along. That was launched quite a while ago now, and Elsa's going to tell us a bit about how that's been working. We've heard a lot now, and I've really enjoyed listening to Cindy and Camille about the why this is so important. We're going to tell you sort of what it is, and so we'll explain the review process, exactly how we went about this review, some of the guiding principles that underpinned it, and then an example, just to show you a couple of slides of how it actually looks. So that's the plan of this part. I'm going to hand over to Elsa now.
So thank you very much, Paul. We thought, as Paul's just said, that we would just tell you how the previous version has been used. So the secondary review, I think, was originally designed as a campaigning tool, really to kind of try and push all the different kind of political stakeholders to think differently about education and its role in relation to climate change. But once it was out there, it became clear that it had a range of other uses. And so here are the things that we've been doing with it so far, as well, what we have been doing, as academics, Paul and I, and other people who've been related, but then also, other people who've been able to use this. So I've personally used it for undergraduate teaching. I know that Paul has as well for education degrees. We've used it for supporting some PGCE teaching. I know that it's been useful for teachers in schools, and Meryl's going to talk about that obviously in greater detail in a minute. We've been using it to think about curriculum materials, things that would support the curriculum. We've talked to exam boards. Alex and I had quite a long discussion with a particular local council who were really interested in using it with their schools. That didn't come off in the end, but I'm pretty sure that the discussions we had enough of an impact for that still to matter. And then I think at the bottom we have some statistics there, which really I think, were from January and are not in any way complete, but they give some sense of how useful the track changes curriculum that we designed has been. And I just want to mention before I hand back to Paul, that in this time, look at what Cindy was providing there as well with her also a different approach to a curriculum, a more kind of completely redesigned curriculum. I think that there are some really important things to consider in terms of context here, which is, where academization has taken place and sort of the, the focus on having to use the curriculum, the national curriculum as it is from a statutory point of view, and also the kind of fact, the way that the national curriculum itself is quite slimmed down. Really, there is actually quite a lot of freedom around that teachers may be able to make use of in the context of their own schools. So I think there's lots of despite the difficulties that we can identify, there's lots of opportunity, and that's one of the things that I take away from this process is really the kind of opportunities that are there within the curriculum itself, but also within the system at the moment. And so we're kind of working from within at the moment, aren't we? Which has been really exciting to do. So I'll hand to Paul now.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Elsa, for the reminder about that point. I thought I love the circle with the various lenses, if you like, that Cindy was talking about, that we could think about the curriculum differently. We had to think about the curriculum as it is. That was the task before us, accepting that the Department for Education is unlikely to completely tear up the curriculum because we ask it to. It's something that's there, it's quite immovable, but it is very flexible. It's not a very dense document these days, so there's plenty of room for manoeuvre inside there. In terms of how we did this, well, we have we did this. It's rather similar to the secondary process, although there are some key differences. We have a reference group, and again, we did this before. We spoke to academics from different subjects, to teacher educators, experts from Royal Meteorological Society, Harmony Project. There's a number of different sort of actors in the field, not always those who are currently teaching, to help us just make sure they're happy with how this is working from their perspective. We wanted to, and we've talked about multiple perspectives. And again, the difference here with primary and secondary, in primary years, we're talking from year one, sort of 5-6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, up to year 6 when they're 11 going into secondary. That's a huge developmental arc for any child. And so it wasn't just a matter of saying, let's look at history, maths and science separately. We had to think about those different stages of life. And so we started actually looking at the Key Stage 1 material, Key Stage 2, and then lower Key Stage 2 as they're transitioning into then upper Key Stage 2, you're reaching 10, 11-year-olds. So that is very different education. So we didn't have that in the secondary. We just looked at Key Stage 3 and 4 and focused on the subject matter. When we did that work, we you can see that we tracked the changes across all the subjects, synchronous and asynchronous. That means we got into small teams to work together, and often because with asking teachers to help and other academics, as you can imagine, it's very difficult. Imagine shoving this in your own day job. People are doing this on a voluntary basis. So people had to work asynchronously. They were working on the document, sending it back. This is where Alex comes in. She was managing all these open documents on sort of OneDrive and keeping track of everything people were doing. When all that was done, we got subject specialists then. These people, again, teachers, teacher educators, academics, have a quick look at this. This is your subject. What do you think? And they would make a couple of adjustments. What do we think of that? I think that word could be better used. What about this word? And so there were comments all the way down the side of these documents. They were incredibly messy, quite unusable. We wouldn't present them to you in this way. And what we had to do at the end then was then sort of refine those, absorb the comments, decide whether to respond to them or not, and tidy them up. And then it went back to our reference group for a very quick final review. Not time for a meeting, but could everybody have a look at this, please? And we got sort of the say-so back, that's good, that's looking fine. What I would say about that final review is it's kind of always ongoing, and you're part of it. by coming here today and signing up for this workshop, you've kind of registered an interest in this area. And if you're that interested to spend your Tuesday afternoon watching us talk about this project, I think it'd be, you are quite legitimately a person who can look at these documents and say, you know what, you could have a better idea here or a better idea there. What about changing it? So whilst we're going to put them on and Teach the Future, uploaded them already, I believe, they are living documents. That's the last point I'm going to make again. So in terms of those, that process, that's all, that part of the process is done. We just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who got involved. Some of you are on the call, I'm sure, and if you are on the call, please do it. Put yourself in the comments, say something, say what you think, what you tell us what you did. But we are very grateful for all the people who put their work into this review. So we've got Elsa, myself, and Alex on the call, or our names are up there. But really, the work has been done by those of you who put this work into these reviews. Elsa, do you want to talk about the guiding principles there?
Yes. So one of the things that we did for the primary, for the secondary document was to devise these guiding principles, which we felt were there literally to guide the people who are doing the work on the different subjects. And so when we started the primary curriculum, we felt these were probably, fairly fit, but we wanted to have a conversation with people who are more engaged in the primary process. So we asked them to have a look at these and to provide us with some ideas about things that they thought might be done slightly differently in the context of a primary school. And you might recognize some of these things just from the competencies document that Cindy was showing earlier. There's always going to be really similarities. There's so much work in this area and there's always going to be similarities. So in many ways, we're not saying something particularly new, but we think that these were expressed in a way that was helpful for this particular role. You can see that we've talked about interconnectedness, we've talked about systems thinking, about these being moral questions, and interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. And so these guided our thinking, and we've divided them. There are 10 of them. You would think we did that on purpose, but we didn't. We've divided them into 3 sections. So that first section, if you don't mind going back one step, Paul, that first section is about interconnectedness and interdependence altogether. And then the second group is about being optimistic and solution focused, sensitive and caring. And you can see we've talked about awe and wonder there, and about dispositions for action. We mention eco-anxiety and the importance of thinking about this from a point of view of well-being. And then the last set is around transformative learning, and this is really where we had a change, which it's really interesting, because one of the things that Camille said right at the start was about imagination and young people and the role of imagination. And that really struck me, because actually we didn't have imagination in our first set of guiding principles for the secondary school. And it really made me think how we'd missed a trick there. But when we had a conversation with our reference group, the thing that they said was that we really needed to bring imagination into the story a little bit. And when I've also been listening to Cindy there, I've been thinking about storytelling. That would be another one that it would be nice to include, that we actually haven't, got in there, but is obviously also really important. So you can see those slight changes that we made, a little bit around language, I think, really, but also the key point about imagination, which is slightly different, of course, from creative and critical thinking. Okay, so I think from my point of view in relation to the guiding principles, those are there. And I think, my hope is that they're useful outside of this project. So obviously, if you want to use them, they're out there on the internet and you can use them freely. It would be nice to be referenced, but we don't mind if you don't. All right, I'll hand back to Paul.
Thanks, Elsa. Okay, so this is the first glance at how the thing looks. If you're not familiar with the secondary documents, they look like this. Here's a primary one. So it's not for you to read. You can see it's very small. But the history program of study as an example, you can see the extent of the changes just here and there. A reminder of, don't forget this. So high quality history education helps pupils gain a coherent and inclusive knowledge and understanding of Britain's past. And so you can see there are little changes in here. The environment gets mentioned. Words which are to be learned, like civilization and parliament, or how about development and colonization? Just pop them in there because they are very relevant to our story. And these are things that get added into the curriculum. just listening to Camille and then Cindy, I thought, you know what, you're talking a lot about different perspectives. So I just thought I'll grab us another, this is a piece of the mathematics curriculum. And again, it's what can you do with maths? It's just numbers, isn't it? And yet, if you just think about the different traditions of maths, it's not all the Western view. Pupils might be introduced to the concept of base 60 as ancient Babylonian system, which we use today. You see, there are coins we're supposed to know about, pounds and pence. Well, what about other coins in different cultures and countries? So those things are just slipped in there. So we are always thinking and sort of decentering ourselves, which I think is a very important thing to do. The last and at the end of every one of these documents we've got, we split the curriculum up into all the different subjects because that's how it's done. But quite important that we correct that again. So at the end of each subject, there's an appendix, which reminds us, and every primary teacher knows this because they'll often teach through projects and themes rather than those subjects. But we just put some reminders in to say, well, here we are, this is history again. It links to other subjects. Here's a link to geography. There's a link to art and design. There will be a link to maths, a link to English, and vice versa. Every topic, every subject that we have, there's a table of links, and Alex has been working on those. And again, over to you. If you think you've got some fantastic links that you spot and you think you'd love to share them, we should be gathering this information, and we can improve these documents over time. We'll probably stop playing with them after a while, but for now, I think they are still fresh. They still need a little bit of tinkering, and we're happy to have suggestions. Just a last reminder then, we're talking about the primary curriculum, but the secondary one is already up there. If you want to look, that's the link to the secondary curriculum. If you do have changes, as we suggested, it's a living document. You can send your suggestions to Hannah, who's been hosting us today. And I think we've probably used up our time. So thank you very much for listening. And I'll hand back to Hannah. Oh, over to Meryl, in fact.
Hello. So I'm Meryl Batchelder. I'm a subject leader for science at Corbridge Middle School, which means I get the lucky position of not just dealing with the key stage 3, key stage 3, but I also get to do the primary. So this is like perfect for me because today we're launching the primary track changes, and I've already been using those secondary, the key stage 3, because I do year 5 to year 8. So anyway, Camille, you started me off and sent me right back to when I was 15. You said you learned about climate change and warming ice caps and things and the polar bears when you were 5. Well, I'm 55 this year, and I learned about them when I was about 15 years old, back in 1984. My geography teacher was quite forward thinking, and she, I was doing GCSE, well, O-level back then, my goodness. And she introduced us this idea of we're burning fossil fuels, the planet's getting warmer, and climate change is happening. And at the time I thought, oh my goodness, this sounds so serious. You know, rising sea levels, drought, you know, wildfires. You know, we talked about this, and this, you know, this is 40 years ago, and we're still here, and we're still waiting for our education system. So I absolutely admire Cindy Forde, and I wish that we could just flip it, you know, because I just, you know, 40 years is a long time in education, and it's still absolutely key, even though our position now is worse than when it was when I first heard about climate change 40 years ago. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we know that our curriculum is based in silos. You know, we have, you know, if you track a child around school, they go to English, they go to maths, then they go to science, and we expect them to be keyed in and clued up as soon as they get there. 5 hours of lessons in a day, sitting there, mainly in classroom basis for most schools, absorbing information, absorbing knowledge, regurgitating it for the test. Very little time for skills building, unless you have certain project-based learning opportunities. And that's how the kids think of their education. Next slide. But we know that life's not like that. It's a mess. It's a mess both in terms of the patterns that we see through life. You know, there's you read books, but they might cover things about geography. You might do some maths in you know, art projects. You might, you know, and now we've got increasing biodiversity issues, climate issues, sustainability issues creeping in. And for the kids it's noisy. It's really noisy. And there, you know, I think trying to dissect this from a child's point of view is a huge issue. And I'm sure over the coming years, you know, we're trying to prevent climate anxiety in young people. And I think we are going to have huge, huge issues. Next slide. Because actually we need to put ourselves absolutely at the heart of these ecosystems. We can live sustainably on Earth. That's a really important message for young people to know. There might be 8 billion people and there will be huge changes for us to live sustainably, but we are absolutely dependent on our Earth systems, and we need to think about those and understand how we link to those, and how the ecosystems link to each other. You know, we are interdependent organisms on Earth. My gut feeling would be absolutely, oh, let's throw the national curriculum in the bin, but I'm pretty sure that wouldn't help the retention and recruitment crisis that's ongoing, and I'm seeing it right now. There's a lot of teachers handing in their notice because they're tired, and so actually changing things wholeheartedly would be too much, I think. And I think, you know, any new government coming in, you know, is going to have to be very careful with how they deal with any changes in curriculum. Next slide. So I started thinking about sustainability 8 years ago when the Paris Agreement came out, and I suddenly had a realization that the curriculum that we are still stuck with today was not fit for purpose. It was outdated already, it was overfull. And so the way I made sense of it 8 years ago, while I was waiting for amazing people to do things like Teach the Future, I started linking everything to the global goals, and it makes learning relevant and engaging. The students understand it. They now have this link throughout lessons as they go through the school day in our school. Not all teachers use them. You know, I haven't managed to get the maths department to pick it up, but the English department, the RE department, food tech, you know, there are even PE actually link to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's really made learning much more sensical as the children go through. But we can't just teach about the cause. So we can't just teach about the causes and consequences of climate change, because it will cause more climate anxiety. We need to be discussing climate justice. We need to allow time for them to build skills. We need to encourage them, promote them to have time for climate action projects themselves. And I think that the reason that I really love the track changes from Key Stage 3 is you've saved me a lot of work. I thought I was pretty good, but you've even just going through, and I haven't read them as a document even, you know, you don't need to. If I'm coming up to teach into a subject, a topic in science, for example, gas exchange systems in plants for my year 8s, I just quickly look at the document, see what's in there, check that I've got what I think I need, see if there's anything new in there, and then bring it in. So if a teacher's not doing an awful lot about sustainability already, it's a really key document to building it in and you know, ensuring that pupils have the best understanding. Because actually, if you look at Key Stage 4, those exam boards that you've been speaking to are bringing in more about climate change. They are actually starting to ask questions about it. It might not be a huge part of the curriculum that the children are learning, but it is part of actually when they're being examined. A lot of they apply this to or understand this. So the more we can build up from Key Stage 1 and 2, that understanding of who we are, our place in the world, as things change, and they will change. You know, I think that, you know, starting them earlier is always easier. The Key Stage 4 is already crammed. We know that it is changing because the exam boards are pushing for that change. But actually, Key Stage, you know, early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, there's so much freedom. There's so much opportunity for teachers to do project-based learning, to connect it through the curriculum so they can see that golden thread when they're in primary, because most schools, my school's unusual, most schools will have the same kids in the classroom, and those links can be made so easily. And it's a beautiful piece of work. I have to say, my hat's off to Elsa and Paul and Alex who've produced it, because I think there's so much opportunity for change in schools without causing huge issues, more workload for teachers, because that's not what we need. The only thing is, I'd say if anybody is teaching about sustainability in school, they should also make it regionally relevant, because each of our regions, even in a small country such as the UK or England, is going to be is making a difference. That's why I've brought in things like Ministry of Eco-Education, because we're starting to make that regionally relevant as well. But yeah, other than that, I'd say it's, you know, work of art. Thank you so much. I think that was my last slide.
Thank you so much, Meryl, and thank you, Elsa and Paul, for introducing the project and really explaining those principles and how we've got to where we are today. We've got a bit of time now for some questions. I know a few people have put them into the Q&A function, and please feel free to continue to put questions in here. We've got Indigenous knowledge is key to further work in this area. Paul, would you like to speak a little bit more about this?
Sorry, I was just about to drop a note in there to say, yes, I agree. That translates differently in different parts of the world, of course. If you're working in parts of the world where Indigenous peoples are still there and they've been colonized, if you like, as in the United States, Canada, parts of Latin America, then or nomadic peoples in Africa. In our own setting, we tend to think about people who have stayed put. They just don't represent the dominant sort of elite intellectual model that is westernizing everything. I think the key thing that's been said so far, and Camille and Cindy both spoke to this, is the different perspectives. And an Indigenous knowledge often is a knowledge of the world before the Enlightenment, before we all decided that science was the answer. I'm not going to knock science, because there's loads of us on this call thanks to science, and without, you know, crawling all over the country trying to meet each other, we're here. So great, science. But just the idea that science is the way, science is the answer, that this need to knock us off our perch occasionally and think about different perspectives. And so while I think in some parts of the world where I've worked, Indigenous knowledge is absolutely what we are trying to marry, if you like, with Western knowledge. In our own culture, I think it's really useful to look at what Indigenous cultures around the world do say, but also just to think about the different perspectives within our own communities as well. They are there, you know, the different subjects of the curriculum. Why is math, science, English so dominant? I think it's about sharing different viewpoints, but I absolutely see that point, and I'm going to wrap around with it by the keep on. So thank you for putting it up there. It's a good reminder.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul. Sarah says, are you talking to the Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Bridget Phillipson, about changes to curriculum needed to fully embed and reflect climate issues? I feel like I can answer that a little bit. I think through our work at Teach the Future and SOS UK, we are in a lot of conversations with members of the Shadow Cabinet as well as the DfE. I know, Meryl, I don't know if you want to come in at this point. I feel like this is relevant.
So, a moment of madness. I was asked by SOS if I would mind hosting a trip, a visit by Bridget Phillipson and Ed Miliband in May. To talk about Teach the Future, to talk about other things that we do in school, eco schools. You know, I've got lots of challenges. My polytunnel blew down, and you know, things like that. So it's like these are the challenges. These are the success stories. So I went to we're in a Conservative county council. So I went to my head teacher and said, would we be able to have Bridget Phillipson and Ed Miliband? And she said yes. And I was like, oh my goodness. So yes, this is happening in May. We're getting 2 MPs, and our potential Labour candidate is coming along as well. So we're hosting them for a couple of hours, showing them what we're doing around school, talking about track changes, giving them a session on Teach the Teacher, because we're doing that in school as well. So we're preparing young people to be able to talk to they're running a staff meeting in just after Easter. So yes, we are talking to Bridget Phillipson and potential future government, the Shadow Secretary. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that they'll pick this up further. I know Nadia Whitcomb is also pushing for this. So yeah, I think that change is happening, which is just fantastic. It's well overdue.
It's so exciting that we've been able to organise that visit, and thank you so much, Meryl, for being so supportive of everything we've done. We've got a comment here which just says incredible amount of work. Thank you. That's really lovely feedback. Thank you for that. Penny says the climate crisis lends itself much more to questions children ask, which might involve a variety of subject areas as well as study skills in finding answers. I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that around study skills.
I'm quite happy talking. I can talk all day about environmental education and climate sustainability education. I'm sure everybody else can. But in terms of in school, there are loads of different programs. I mentioned Ministry of Eco-Education, and that does about inquiry questions. What's it take to make a cup of tea? You know, and that crosses all sorts of boundaries. It brings some maths in there. It brings, you know, it brings food tech in there. It brings geography in there about where it's coming from. And so there are different, you know, so they've designed a curriculum that you can actually embed sustainability across it. And that's specifically for primary, although there are some key stage 3 things now as well. So, you know, I think if you're looking for other opportunities, you know, if you're trying to think, okay, I need some resources to be able to teach this, then there are, you know, the Global Action Plan have got loads on their website and things as well, Transform Our World. So, you know, I think there's lots and lots of things out there, but a lot of teachers aren't that aware. So it's trying to save time and find those links, you know, easily. But Transform Our World is well worth checking out as, you know, Ministry of Eco-Education.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, Meryl, as well. I mean, I think it can really create a hugely exciting project to do in schools, really. And, you know, and again, you know, basing things on solutions, because you give the opportunity. I mean, just reference to my book, I've worked in schools where they've taken that and they've actually designed what a city of the future will look like, what a farming food systems of the future will look like, what you know, what education for the future will look like, what transport. So the whole schools come together and created, you know, a workaround. I think it's a really compelling theme. And instead of it being positioned as something that's terrifying, it's a really huge opportunity to innovate and really let the children get their hands on those actual physical things they can do in school, creating the, you know, gardens, beehives, whatever, wind turbines, all sorts of things that connect in a really transdisciplinary way. So I think it's a real gift in actual fact to be able to use that as a learning topic, learning and, you know, enriched learning and study topic. I've got their hand up.
Hi, that was me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just, do you mind if I go for it? Thank you. I just wanted to make one comment because I know we're coming probably to the end of which might respond to a couple of the questions in the chat. One of the things that we haven't quite managed to do yet is write the report that we did for the secondary curriculum. So Paul and I will be working on that sort of like slightly belated. It wasn't actually part of the contract for this particular one, but we think it was really helpful. And I note that somebody mentioned how there was a little kind of summary of the changes for each of the different subjects in the secondary report, and we haven't done that yet for the primary, but we will definitely look into that and think about how we can do it. It's probably less necessary for primary because the sections are so much shorter. But there are things like English and maths and science where it might be useful, and I think, you know, potentially we can think about doing it anyway across the board. And then somebody else mentioned Sylvia Knight. I know Sylvia was on the call at least, and she was really one of the members of our reference group with the Royal Meteorological Society. We mentioned her, but we really would like to also, Paul did say thank you to everybody more generally, but again, when we publish a report, we will acknowledge everybody who would like to be acknowledged and who's worked on the project with us. There have been about 40 people altogether, so it's been a really big team again. So just to make that clear, that there were lots of people involved, lots of teachers, practicing primary school teachers, very busy. But you know that we will acknowledge as soon as we get that report together. It's not quite there yet. Thank you.
Just one final thing from me. It's a big miss that Ofsted have not been mentioned here in some ways, but I would say if you show that interdisciplinary working, project-based learning, anything to do with sustainability, and Ofsted come in, they do like it, even if it's not part of the criteria that they're looking for. It worked well for us a couple of years ago. And so, you know, and I think it will become increasingly, especially with, you know, looking for the DfE's action plan for, you know, climate action plans for schools and trying to decarbonise the school estate. You know, organisations such as Let's Go Zero, there's all sorts of help climate action, the support hubs that are coming for climate ambassadors. I think there's a huge amount of change is going to happen in the next few years. Much needed.
Track changes Ofsted criteria. That's next on the list.
Thank you so much for the questions. Unfortunately, we just aren't going to have time to cover all of them. There was a question I saw just before, which was around where are the documents available, and hopefully Marta's been able to upload them by the end of this session. So they are on Teach the Future's website, and they should be from now, if not within the next sort of half an hour or so, and you'll be able to view all of these documents. So just before we finish, we're going to hear from another young person involved in Teach the Future, Finley, who is going to talk to us about the general election campaign that they're preparing at the moment.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'll speed through this really quickly for you guys. Ahead of the general election at Teach the Future, we are planning a campaign called, as you can see on the screen here, Is Climate Education on Their Cards? So what the project's going to do really is we're going to encourage our volunteers and people across the country to meet up with their local candidates for constituencies and ask them to fill out a report card to show their commitment to our climate education asks. So the asks we will have on this card are integration of climate change through every subject, teaching on solutions for climate change as well as its causes and impacts, more training for teachers around the climate crisis. And what we're going to do with these responses is we're going to create a portal online, which will try and create a easy to access portal where young people can get the information they need to help inform their vote and see which candidates are the most climate conscious, if you like. So we would love it if you could pledge your support to our general election campaign by signing our pledge, which is linked on the next page along here. And I will also paste that link into the chat there. Thanks very much, everyone.
That's great.
Fabulous, thank you so much. And in fact, I'll put that back on just in case anyone didn't get it, just in case you want to scan that QR code to call for more politicians to implement climate education, which I know is something we are all so passionate about. Thank you so much to everyone who's taken part today. I am actually really jealous of everyone still working in schools and wish I was, so I could go ahead and implement these amazing documents. And I really loved hearing from Cindy about that bigger picture and how we can rethink the education system as a whole, from Paul and Elsa about, you know, how we got to this space, from young people about how they want things to change, and then from Meryl just about actually how we can implement things in school. If you would like to find out more, you can hopefully now see the project online. There's a link to the website there, teachthefuture.uk/tracked-changes-project, and all of these documents are hosted up there for free and they should be there forever, so please go ahead and use them in your schools. If you would like to keep in touch, we've put Teach the Future's email address and details of their socials there, so please do get in touch if you've got any ideas or things that you'd like to suggest. But I'd just like to say a big thank you again to everyone for being involved, and really hopefully this is going to make a really big difference in our primary schools and really help make that change that I know we all want to see. So thank you so much for attending, everyone, and hopefully this will be something really exciting to get started on.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks,